Good morning. Hello, Elpor. Hi, Cal. Hi. Good morning. Sorry it took so long. I was just taking care of some stuff. But good morning. Hi, everybody. Hello. We're going to continue reading. Hi, Sarah. Hello. I'm glad you're doing well. And yes, of course, you have me in the background. No problemo. Hi, Wasabi. I have no idea what you said, but I see Fortnite and Cola, so I'm going to assume it's a troll. So I wish you had your copy. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I have a box set. I got lucky and found the box set at my favorite bookstore, and my favorite used bookstore. So I got lucky. In case my shitting all that. Okay, Cal, thanks for shouting that out. I have had a stomach virus all night last night. I was absolutely doing exactly that. I feel better now. I had some dry toast and I had some peppermint tea now to help settle my stomach. I'm a little quiet. Hold on. Am I quiet? How about now? Is that better? Am I still quiet? Am I still quiet for you, Cal? Am I still quiet? No, I'm kidding. Is that better? I hope that's better. Hi, Beans. Good morning. Beans also decided to stop by and say good morning and knock all my teddy bears off my table once again. And yep, she made herself comfortable. So a little distant sounding. Hold on, let me fix my mic. Did I drink pilk? No, I did not drink pilk. If I drank pilk, I would not be here right now. I'd be very sick because I don't like soda and I don't drink milk. But I am doing better. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling a lot better, and my stomach still kind of hurts, but I purged my system, so I feel a lot better. But yes, today we're gonna continue with Alice in Wonderland, and then we're gonna finish Alice in Wonderland and start Through the Looking Glass. So hopefully by next week we'll be able to finish the books, both books, and read the whole series right there. All right, Beans, you gonna sit here and chill? Okay, so Beans is gonna chill. I'm gonna have a sip of my tea before I start. Peppermint tea. Two negatives make a positive, though, I guess. I mean, I feel kind of blech. We only have like maybe one chapter. We have like one chapter left. Or we have a few chapters left before we finish Alice in Wonderland, and then of course we're gonna get into Beans. I should put Beans. And then we're gonna get into Through the Looking Glass. I have it right here next to me, so. Alright. Chapter 9. The Mock Turtle Story. Oh, excuse me. You comfortable, Beans? She's making herself comfortable. Did you make yourself comfortable? You good? You good? You good, Mama? You good, my cute little Mama? You good? Comfy? Yeah? Okay. Let's see, The Mock Turtle Story. You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing, said the Duchess, as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage that when they met in the kitchen. And I'm a Duchess, she said to herself, not in a very hopeful tone, though. I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without it. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered, she went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule. and vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile that makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that. Then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know. She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit. Perhaps it hasn't one, Alice ventured to remark. Tut tut, child, said the Duchess. Everything's got a moral, even though if only you can find it. And she squeezed herself up close to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not much like keeping her so close to her. First, because the Duchess was very ugly, and secondly, because she was exactly the right height to rest her chin on Alice's shoulder, and it was an uncomfortably sharp chin. However, she did not like to be rude, so she bore it as well as she could. The game's going on rather better now, she said, by the way of keeping up the conversation a little. 'Tis so, said the Duchess, and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round. Somebody said, Alice whispered, that it's done by everyone minding their own business. Ah, well, it means much the same thing, said the Duchess, digging her sharp little chin into Alice's shoulder as she added, and the moral of that is, take care of the sense, and the sound will take care of themselves. How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. I dare say you're wondering why I don't put my arm around your waist, said the Duchess after a pause. The reason is that I am doubtful of the temper of your flamingo. Shall I try the experiment? He might bite, Alice cautiously replied, not feeling at all anxious to have the experiment tried. Very true, said the Duchess. Flamingos and mustards both bite. And the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together. Only mustard isn't a bird, Alice remarked. Right as usual, said the Duchess. What a clear way you have of putting things. It's a mineral, I think, said Alice. Of course it is, said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree to everything that Alice said. There's a large mustard mine near here, and the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours. Oh, I know, exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is. Hi, Claria. Welcome, welcome. I hope you are enjoying the story. We're continuing Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and then after Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, we're going to be starting Through the Looking Glass quite immediately. So I hope you are ready to listen. I hope you are enjoying, friend. I quite agree with you, said the Duchess. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or, if you like to put it more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others, that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be the otherwise. I think I should understand that better, said Alice very politely, if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it. That's nothing to what I could say if I chose, the Duchess replied in a pleasant tone. Pray, don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that, said Alice. Oh, don't talk about trouble, said the Duchess. I make you a present of everything I've said as yet. A cheap sort of present, thought Alice. I'm glad they don't give birthday presents like that. But she did not venture to say it out loud. Thinking again, the Duchess asked, with another sharp dig of her sharp little chin. I've a right to think, said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. Just about as much right, said the Duchess, as pigs have to fly, but here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's voice died away, even in the middle of her favorite word, moral. And the arm that was linking to hers began to tremble. Alice soon looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. A fine day, your Majesty, the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. Now, I give you fair warning, shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. Either you or your head must be off, and that in about half no time. Take your choice. The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was much too frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. Words. Hard. Do you know the game Alice, the Madness Returns? Yes, I do. I've never played it, but I do know of it. I do know a bit of it. I've never got the chance to play it. If and when I get a better PC, I'm definitely going to want to try to play it for the first time. So, yeah. The other guests have taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, the Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by soldiers, who of course had to leave off being archers to do this. So about the end of half an hour or so, there were no archers left, and all the players except the King, Queen, and Alice were in custody under the sentence of execution. Then, the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the Mock Turtle yet?" "No," said Alice. "I don't even know what a mock turtle is." "It's the thing mock turtle soup is made from," said the Queen. "I've never saw or heard of one," said Alice. "Come on, then," said the Queen, "and he shall tell you his history." As they walked off together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned. Come, that's a good thing." She said, "Come, that's a good thing," she said to herself, for she had felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look up at the picture. If you don't know what a griffin is, look it up online. I can't quite show you the picture, sadly. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the Mock Turtle, and to hear his history. I must go back and see after some executions I've ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole she thought it would be quite as safe to stay with it as to go after that savage Queen. So she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes, then watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun!" said the griffin, half to itself, half to Alice. "What is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy, that. They never execute nobody, you know. Come on." "Everyone says come on here," thought Alice, as she went slowly after it. "I never was so ordered about before in all my life. Never." It's old but it's good? Yes. Definitely. I definitely do want to try it out at some point. They had not gone far before they saw the Mock Turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock, and, as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. What is his sorrow?" she asked the griffin, and the griffin answered very nearly the same words as before. "It's all his fancy, that. He hasn't got no sorrow, you know. Come on." So they went up to the Mock Turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This here young lady," said the griffin, She wants for to know your history, she do." "I'll tell it to her," said the Mock Turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word until I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin." But she waited patiently. "Once," said the Mock Turtle at last, with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken by an occasional exclamation of from the griffin, and the constant heaving sobbing of the Mock Turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for your interesting story," but she could not help thinking there must be more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. "When we were little," the Mock Turtle went on at last, more calmly, though still sobbing a little now and then, "we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise." "Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?" Alice asked. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us," said the Mock Turtle angrily. "Really, you are very dull." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question," added the griffin, and they both sat silent and looked at poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the griffin said to the Mock Turtle, "Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it." And he went on in these words. "Yes, we went to school in the sea. though you mayn't believe it. I never said I didn't, interrupted Alice. You did, said the Mock Turtle. Hold your tongue, added the Griffin before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on. We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day. I've been to a day school too, said Alice. You needn't be so proud as all that. With extras, added the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. Yes, we learned French and music. And washing, said the Mock Turtle. Certainly not, added Alice indignantly. Ah, then yours wasn't a very good school, said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. Now, ours, they had at the end of the bill, French, music, and washing. Extra. You couldn't have wanted it much, said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. I couldn't afford to learn it, said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. I only took the regular course. What was that? Alice inquired. Reeling and rising, of course, to begin with, the Mock Turtle replied, and then the different branches of arithmetic, ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. I've never heard of uglification, Alice ventured to say. What is it? The Griffin lifted up both paws in surprise. Never heard of uglifying, he exclaimed. You know what beautifying is, I suppose. Yes, Alice said doubtfully. It means to make anything prettier. Well then, the Griffin went on, if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a simpleton. Alice did not feel very encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, What else had you to learn? Well, there was misery, the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subjects on his flappers. Mystery, ancient and modern, oceanography, then drolling. The drolling master was an old conger eel that used to come once a week. He taught us drawing, stretching, and fainting in coils. What was that like? Hi, Kakarot. Hello. You are going to be lurking. I hope you enjoy the story, friend. Well, I can't show you myself, the Mock Turtle said. I'm too stiff, and the Griffin had never learned it. Had it time, said the Griffin. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say. So he did, said the Griffin, sighing in his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. And how many hours a day did you do lessons? Said Alice, in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 on the next, and so on. What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice. That's the reason they're called lessons, the Griffin remarked, because they lesson from day to day. This is quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little before she made her next remark. Then the 11th day must have been a holiday. Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. And how did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about lessons, the Griffin interrupted in a very decided tone. Tell her something about the games now. Chapter 10. The Lobster Quadrille. The Mock Turtle... move this out of the way. There we go. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and drew the back of one flipper across his eyes. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two sobs choked his voice. Same as if he had a bone in his throat, said the Griffin, and set to work shaking him and punching him in the back. At last the Mock Turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks, he went on again. You may not have lived much under the sea. I haven't, said Alice. And perhaps you were never introduced to a lobster. Alice began to say, I once tasted, but then checked herself hastily and said, No, never. So you have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is. No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of dance is it? Why, said the Griffin, you first form into a line along the seashore. 2 lines, cried the Mock Turtle. Seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. Then, when you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way, That generally takes some time, interrupted the Griffin. You advance twice. Each with a lobster as a partner, cried the Griffin. Of course, the Mock Turtle said. Advance twice, to set partners. Change lobsters and retire in the same order, continued the Griffin. Then, you know, the Mock Turtle went on. You throw the lobsters, shouted the Griffin with a bound into the air. As far out to the sea as you can. Swim after them, screamed the Griffin. Turn a somersault in the sea, cried the Mock Turtle, capering wildly about. Change lobsters again, yelled the Griffin at the top of his voice. Back to land again. And all that's the first figure, said the Mock Turtle, suddenly dropping his voice, and the two creatures, who had been jumping about like mad things all this time, sat down again very sadly and quietly and looked at Alice. It must be a very pretty dance, said Alice timidly. Would you like to see a little of it? Said the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed. Hi, Jack. Hi. Welcome, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the story, Floofle. I hope you're enjoying the story. Would you like to see a little of it? Said the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed, said Alice. Come, let's try the first figure, said the Mock Turtle to the Griffin. We could do it without lobsters, you know. Which shall sing? Oh, you sing, said the Griffin. I've forgotten the words. So they began solemnly dancing around and around Alice, every now and then treading on her toes as they passed too close, moving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang it was very slowly and sadly. Will you walk a little faster, said Whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not join the dance. Would not, could not join the dance. What matters it how far we go, his scaly friend replied. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance? Thank you. It's a very interesting dance to watch, said Alice, feeling very glad that it was over at last. I do so like that curious song about the whiting. Long time no see? Yes, no long time no see, Jack. I'm glad you can make it for story time. I hope tomorrow you can make it for a new game that we're going to be playing. I got a new game for tomorrow that we're going to be playing. So it's going to be fun. So I hope you can join us for that too. There we go. Oh, as to the whiting, said the Mock Turtle, you've seen them, of course. Yes, said Alice. I often seen them at Din. She checked herself quite hastily. I don't know where Din may be, said the Mock Turtle. But if you've seen them so often, of course, you know what they're like. I believe so, Alice replied thoughtfully. They have their tails in their mouths, and they're all over crumbs. You're wrong about the crumbs, said the Mock Turtle. Crumbs would all wash off in the sea. They have their tails in their mouths, and the reason is... Here the Mock Turtle yawned and shut his eyes. Tell her about the reason and all that, he said to the Griffin. The reason is, said the Griffin, that they would go with the lobsters to the dance, so they got thrown out to sea. So they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths, so they couldn't get them out again. That's all. Thank you, said Alice. It is very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before. I could tell you more than that if you like, said the Griffin. Do you know why it's called a whiting? I never thought about it, said Alice. Why? It does the boots and shoes. said the Griffin. Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. Does the boots and shoes? She repeated in a wondering tone. Why, what are your shoes done with? Said the Griffin. I mean, what makes them so shiny? Alice looked down at them and considered a little before she gave her answer. They're done with blacking, I suppose. I believe. Boots and shoes under the sea, the Griffin went on in a deep voice, are done with whiting. Now you know. And what are they made of? Alice asked in a tone of great curiosity. Soles and heels, of course. The Griffin replied rather impatiently. Any shrimp could have told you that. If I'd been the whiting, said Alice, whose thoughts were still running on the song, I'd have said to the porpoise, keep back, please, we don't want you with us. They were obliged to have him with them, said the Mock Turtle. No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise. Wouldn't it really? Said Alice in a tone of great surprise. Of course not, said the Mock Turtle. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I should say, with what porpoise? Don't you mean purpose? Said Alice. I mean what I say, the Mock Turtle replied in an offended tone, and the Griffin added, Come, let's hear some of your adventures. I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning, said Alice a little timidly, but it's no use going back to yesterday, because I was a different person then. Explain all that, said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first, said the Griffin in an impatient tone. Explanations take such a dreadful time. So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the white rabbit. She was a little nervous about it, just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide, but she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, Your old Father William to the caterpillar, and the words are all coming out different. And then the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, That's very curious. It's about as curious as it can be, said the Griffin. It all came different, said the Mock Turtle, repeating thoughtfully. I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin. She looked at the Griffin as if he thought it had some kind of authority over Alice. Stand up and repeat, "'Tis the voice of the sluggard," said the Griffin. How creatures order one about and make one repeat lessons, thought Alice. I might just as well be at school at once. However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came out very queer indeed. "'Tis the voice of the lobster. I heard him declare, You have baked me too brown, and must sugar my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose, shoots his belt and his buttons, and turns out his toes." That's different from what I used to say when I was a child, said Griffin. Well, I've never heard it before, said the Mock Turtle, but it sounds uncommon nonsense. Alice said nothing. She had sat down again with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in a natural way again. I should like to have it explained, said the Mock Turtle. She can't explain it, said the Griffin hastily. Go on with the next verse. But about his toes, the Mock Turtle persisted. How can he turn them out with his nose, you know? It's the first position in dancing, Alice said, but she was dreadfully puzzled by the whole thing, and longed to change the subject. Go on with the next verse, the Griffin repeated impatiently. It begins, I passed by his garden. Alice did not dare to disobey, though she felt sure it would all come wrong, and she went on in a trembling voice. I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the oyster were sharing a pie. What is the use of repeating all that stuff? The Mock Turtle interrupted. If you don't explain it as you go on. It's by far the most confusing thing I've ever heard. Yes, I think you better leave off, said the Griffin, and Alice was only too glad to do so. Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille? The Griffin went on. Or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you a song? Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle would be so kind, Alice replied so eagerly that the Griffin said, in a rather offended tone, no accounting for taste. Sing her turtle soup, will you, old fellow? The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and began in a voice sometimes choked with sobs to sing this. Beautiful soup so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen, for who such dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for 2p? That was so weirdly written. Hold on. Who would not give all else for 2 pennies worth of only of beautiful soup? Penny worth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Chorus again, cried the Griffin, and the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it when a cry of "The trial's beginning!" was heard in the distance. Come on, cried the Griffin, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off without waiting for the end of the song. What trial is it? Alice panted as she ran on, but the Griffin only answered, "Come on!" and ran the faster, while the more and more faintly came, carried on the breeze that followed them, the melancholy words, "Soup of the evening, beautiful soup." Chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them, all sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains. Excuse me. Oh, shit! No! Poop! Ah! Damn! I spilled my tea. Oh no. That's not good. I don't have any tissues. Oh no. Okay, hold on. I spilled my tea. Hold on. It's all over the place. Oh no. I have some tissues. Hold on. Thankfully I didn't spill anything on wires, but oh my gosh, that was close. I spilled tea everywhere. Can't trust me with anything. I spilled tea all over my floor, guys. Oh no. Yeah, it's a good thing I was gonna mop the floors today. Man, I spilled tea everywhere. Oh no. Oh, it's all over my mat. It's okay. It's okay, it's just tea. It's just tea. Milky's crying over spilled tea. Well, it's a good thing I have some tissues. That's embarrassing. Okay. Well, that was embarrassing. Let's see. Where was I? Where was I? Where did I leave off? I forgot where I left off. Oh no. Okay, there we go. That's where I went. That's where I left off. I might as well start from the beginning of this. I don't know where I left off, but forget it. Start from the beginning. The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on the throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them, all sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was a white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. I wish they could get the trial done, she thought, and hand round the refreshments. But there seemed to be no chance of this, so she began to look at everything about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the names of nearly everything here. That's the judge, she said to herself, because of his great wig. The judge, by the way, was a king, as he wore his crown over the wig. He did not look at all comfortable. and it was certainly not becoming. And that's the jury box, thought Alice, and those 12 creatures. She was obliged to say creatures, you see, because some of them were animals and some were birds. I suppose they are the jurors, she said. She said this last word 2 or 3 times to herself. She said this last word or two or three times over to herself, being rather proud of it, for she thought, and rightly too, that very few little girls of her age knew the meaning of it all. However, jurymen would have done just as well. The 12 jurors were all writing very busily on slates. What are they doing? Alice whispered to the Griffin. They can't have anything put down yet before the trial's begun. They're putting down their names, the Griffin whispered in reply, for fear that they should forget them before the trial ends. Stupid things! Alice began in a loud, indignant voice, but she stopped herself hastily, for the White Rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" And the King put on his spectacles and looked anxiously around to make out who was talking. Alice could see, as well as if she were looking over their shoulders, that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slate, and she could even make out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that he had to ask his neighbor to tell him. A nice muddle their slates will be before the trial's over, thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil that squeaked. This, of course, Alice could not stand, and she went round the court and got behind him, and very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill, the lizard, could not make out at all what had become of it, so after hunting about for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day, and this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate. "Herald, read the accusation," said the King. On this, the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll, and read as follows. "The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts, and took them quite away." "Consider your verdict," the King said to the jury. Not yet, the Rabbit hastily interrupted. "There's a great deal to come before that." "Call the first witness," said the King, and the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and called out, "First witness!" The first witness was the Hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "I beg your pardon, your Majesty," he began, "for bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for." "You ought to have finished," said the King. "When did you begin?" The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was, he said. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, added the Dormouse. "Write that down," the King said to his jury. And the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates on their slates, and then added them up and reduced the answer to shillings and pence. "Take off your hat," the King said to the Hatter. "It isn't mine," said the Hatter. "Stolen," the King exclaimed, turning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. "I keep them to sell," the Hatter added as an explanation. "I have none of my own. I am a Hatter." Here the Queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. "Give your evidence," said the King, and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the Queen, and in his confusion he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a great deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court, but on second thought she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her. "I wish you wouldn't squeeze so," said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to her. "I can hardly breathe." "I can't help it," said Alice very meekly. "I'm growing." "You've no right to grow here," said the Dormouse. "Don't talk nonsense," said Alice more boldly. "You know you're growing too." "Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace," said the Dormouse. "Not in that ridiculous fashion." And he got up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. All this time the Queen had never left off staring at the Hatter, and, just as the Dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, "Bring me the list of the singers in the last concert," on which the wretched Hatter trembled so that he shook both his shoes off. "Give your evidence," said the king repeatedly. The king repeated angrily, "or I'll have you executed whether you're nervous or not." "I am a poor man, your majesty," the hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't but just begun my tea, not above a week or so, and what with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea." "The twinkling of what?" said the king. "It began with the tea," the hatter replied. "Of course twinkling begins with the tea," the king said sharply. "Do you take me for a dunce? Go on." "I am a poor man," the hatter went on, "and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said—" "I didn't," the March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. "You did," said the hatter. "I deny it," said the March Hare. "He denies it," said the king. "Leave out that part." "Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said," the hatter went on, looking anxiously around to see if he would deny it too. But the Dormouse denied nothing, being fast asleep. "After that," continued the hatter, "I cut some more bread and butter." "But what did the Dormouse say?" one of the jury asked. "That I can't remember," said the hatter. "You must remember," remarked the king, "or I'll have you executed." The miserable hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. "I'm a poor man, your majesty," he began. "You're a very poor speaker," said the king. Here one of the guinea pigs cheered, and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court. As that is a rather harsh word, I will just explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag which they tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this they slipped the guinea pig head first and then sat upon it. I'm glad to have seen that done," thought Alice. "I've so often read in the newspapers, at the end of trials, there were some attempts at applause which was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I've never understood what it meant until now." "If that's all you know about it, you may stand down," continued the king. "It can go no lower," said the hatter. "I'm on the floor as it is." "Then you may sit down," replied the king. Here another guinea pig cheered and was suppressed. "Come, that finishes the guinea pigs," thought Alice. "Now we shall better get on." "I'd rather finish my tea," said the hatter, with an anxious look to the queen, who was reading the list of singers. "You may go," said the king, and the hatter hurriedly left the court, without even waiting to put his shoes on. "And just take his head off outside," said the queen to one of her officers, but the hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. "Call the next witness," said the king. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was even before she got into the court, by the way people near the door began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence," said the king. "Shan't," said the cook. The kitten looked anxiously at the white rabbit, who said in a low voice, Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness." "Well, if I must, I must," the king said with a melancholy air, and after folding his arms and frowning at the cook until his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, "What are the tarts made of?" "Pepper, mostly," said the cook. "Treacle," said a sleepy voice behind her. "Collar that dormouse!" the queen shrieked out. "Behead that dormouse! Turn that dormouse out of court! Suppress him! Pinch him! Off with his whiskers!" For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out, and, by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. "Never mind," said the king with an air of great relief. "Call the next witness," and he added in an undertone to the queen, "Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache." Alice watched the white rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. "For they haven't got much evidence yet," she said to herself. Imagine her surprise when the white rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name Alice. Chapter 12. Alice's Evidence. "Here!" cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up with such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen onto their heads of the crowd below. And there they lay sprawled about, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. "Oh, I beg your pardon!" she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back into the jury box or they would die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he said so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that, in her haste, she had put the lizard in head downwards, and the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right. "Not that it signifies much," she said to herself. "I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other." As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with his mouth open, gazing up at the roof of the court. "What do you know about this business?" said the king to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said the Alice. That's very important," said the king, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates when the White Rabbit interrupted. "Unimportant, your majesty, means, of course," he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. "Unimportant, of course, I meant," the king said hastily, and went on to himself in an undertone. "Important, unimportant, unimportant, important," as if he were trying which word sounded best. Some of the jury wrote down important, and some unimportant. Alice could see this, but as she was near enough to look over their slates. "But it doesn't matter a bit," she thought to herself. At this moment, the king, who had been for some time busily writing his notebook, called out, "Silence!" and read out from his book, "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high had to leave the court." Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It is the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There is more evidence to come yet, please, your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "I haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, in which it isn't usual, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "It isn't directed at all," said the White Rabbit. "In fact, there's nothing written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, "It isn't a letter after all. It's a set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked one of the jurymen. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit, "and that's the queerest thing about it." The jury all looked puzzled. "He must have imitated somebody else's hand," said the king. The jury all brightened up again. "Please, your majesty," said the knave, "I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end." "If you didn't sign it," said the king, "that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man." There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first really clever thing the king had said that day. "That proves his guilt," said the queen. "It proves nothing of the sort," said Alice. "Why, you don't even know what they're about." "Read them," said the king. The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. "Where shall I begin, please, your majesty?" He began. He asked. "Begin at the beginning," said the king, gravely, "and go on till you come to the end, and then stop." These are the verses the White Rabbit read. "They told me you had been to her, and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what will become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2, you gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him, from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free, exactly as we were." My notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him, ourselves, and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must never be. A secret kept from all the rest, between yourself and me. That is the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So now, let the jury. If any one of them can explain it, said Alice. She had grown so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him. I'll give him a sixpence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. The jury all wrote down on their slates, she doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. But none of them attempted to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, and you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet, I don't know. He went on, spreading out the verse on his knee, and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said, which he certainly did not, being made entirely of cardboard. All right, so far, said the king. He went on muttering over the verse himself. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what you did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on, they all returned from him to you, said Alice. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. And then again, before she had this fit, you never had fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen furiously, throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one finger, as he found it made no mark, but now hastily began using the ink that was trickling down his face as long as it lasted. Then the words don't fit you, said the king, looking around the court with a smile. There was a dead silence. It's a pun, the king added in an angry tone, and everyone laughed. Let the jury consider the verdict, said the king, for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright, half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the tree on her face. Wake up, dear Alice, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice. She told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear, certainly, but now run into your tea. It's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well as she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still as she left her, leaning her head on her hand, watching the setting sun, and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures. So she too began dreaming after a fashion, and this was her dream. First she dreamt of little Alice herself. Once again the tiny hands were clasped upon her knee, and the bright eager eyes were looking up into hers. She could hear the very tones of her voice, to see that queer little toss of her head, to keep back the wandering hair that would always get in her eyes. As still as she listened, or seemed to listen, the whole place around her became alive with the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. The long grass rustled at her feet as the white rabbit hurried by. The frightened mouse splashed its way through the neighboring pool. She could hear the rattle of the teacups as the March Hare and his friends shared their never-ending meal, and the shrill voice of the queen ordering off her unfortunate guests to execution. Once more the pig baby was sleeping on the Duchess's knee, while plates and dishes crashed around it. Once more the shriek of the griffin, the squeak of the lizard's slate pencil, and the choking of the suppressed guinea pigs filled the air, mixed up with the distant sob of the miserable mock turtle. So she sat on, her eyes closed, half believed herself in Wonderland. Though she knew she had but to open them again, all would change to dull reality. The grass would only be rustling in the wind, and the pool rippling to the waving of the reeds. The rattling teacups would change into tinkling sheep bells, and the queen's shrill cries to the voice of the shepherd boy, and the sneeze of the baby, and the shriek of the griffin, and all the other queer noises would change, she knew, to the confused clamor of the busy farmyard, while the lowering of the cattle in the distance would take the place of the mock turtle's heavy sobs. Lastly, she pictured herself how this same little sister of hers would, in the aftertime, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through all her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about the other little children and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows, and find a pleasure in all their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summer days. The end. That's the end of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which is a great book. A little confusing, a little wacky, but we're gonna continue on with Through the Looking Glass. So let me just put this book away back in this little box. There we go. Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. Gonna continue on. Gonna go on going on. Let's go. Let's see. Let's see. Child of the pure and clouded brow, and the dreaming eyes of wonder, so time be fleet, and I and thou are half a life asunder. Thy loving smile will surely hail the love gift of a fairy tale. I have not seen thy sunny face, nor heard thy silver laugh. No thought of me shall find a place in thy young life hereafter. Enough that now thou wilt not fail to listen to my fairy tale. A tale begun in other days, when summer suns were glowing. A simple chime that served to time the rhyme of our rowing, whose echoes live in memory yet, though envious years would say forget. Come, hearken then, ere a voice of dread, with bitter tidings laden, shall summon to unwelcome bed a melancholy maiden. We are but older children, dear, who fret to find our bedtime near. Without the frost, the blinding snow, the storm wind's moody madness, with the firelight's ruddy glow, and childhood's nest of gladness, the magic words shall hold thee fast, thou shalt not heed the raving blast. And though the shadow of a sigh may tremble through the story, for happy summer days gone by, and vanished summer glory, it shall not touch the birth of Bale, the pleasance of our fairy tale. Chapter 1. Looking Glass House. Grab a sip of tea real quick. One thing was certain, that the white kitten had nothing to do with it. It was the black kitten's fault entirely, for the white kitten had been having its face washed by the old cat for the last quarter of an hour, and bearing it pretty well considering. So you see that it couldn't have had any hand in the mischief. The way Dinah washed her children's face was this. First she held the poor thing down by its ear with one paw, and then with the other paw she rubbed its face all over, the wrong way, beginning at the nose, and just now, as I said, she was hard at work on the white kitten, which was lying quite still and trying to purr, no doubt feeling that it was all meant for its good. But the black kitten had been finished with earlier in the afternoon, and so, while Alice was sitting curled up in a corner of the great armchair, half talking to herself and half asleep, the kitten had been having a grand game of romps with a ball of worsted Alice had been trying to wind up, and had been rolling it up and down until it had all come undone again. And there it was, spread all over the hearth rug, all knots and tangles, some kitten running after its own tail in the middle. "Oh, you wicked, wicked little thing!" cried Alice, catching up the kitten and giving it a little kiss to make it understand that it was in disgrace. Really, Dinah ought to have taught you better manners. You ought, Dinah, you ought, she added, looking reproachfully at the old cat, speaking in as cross a voice as she could manage. And then she scrambled back into the armchair, taking the kitten in the worsted with her, and began winding up the ball again. But she didn't go on very fast, as she was talking all the time, sometimes to the kitten, sometimes to herself. Kitty sat very demurely on her knee, pretending to watch the progress of the winding, and now and then putting out one paw and gently touching the ball, as if it would be glad to help in it, if it might. "Do you know what tomorrow is, Kitty?" Alice began. "You'd have guessed if you'd been up in the windows with me. Only Dinah was making me tidy, so you couldn't. I was watching the boys getting in sticks for the bonfire, and it wants plenty of sticks, Kitty. Only it got so cold, and it snowed so, they had to leave it off." "Never mind, Kitty. We'll go and see the bonfire tomorrow." Here Alice swung 2 or 3 turns of the worsted round the kitty's neck just to see how it would look. This led to a scramble in which the ball rolled down upon the floor, and yards of it got unwound again. "Do you know, I was so angry, Kitty," Alice went on, as soon as they were comfortably settled again. "When I saw all your mischief you had been doing, I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out into the snow. And you'd have deserved it, you little mischievous darling. What have you got to say for yourself?" "Now, don't interrupt me," she went on, holding up one finger. "I'm going to tell you all your faults. Number 1, you squeaked twice while Dinah was washing your face this morning. Now, you can't deny it, Kitty. I heard you." "What's that you say?" pretending that the kitten was speaking. "Her paw went in your eye. Well, that's your fault for keeping your eyes open. If you'd shut them tight, it wouldn't have happened. Now, don't make any more excuses, but listen." Excuse me. "Number 2, you pulled Snowdrop away by the tail just as I had put down the saucer of milk before her. What, you were thirsty, weren't you? How you know she wasn't thirsty too? Now for number 3. You won every bit of the worsted while I wasn't looking. That's 3 faults, Kitty, and you've not been punished for any of them yet. You know I'm saving up all of your punishments for Wednesday week. Suppose they have saved up all my punishments," she went on, talking more to herself than the kitten. "What would they do at the end of the year? I should be sent to prison, or suppose when the day came. Or, let me see, suppose each punishment was to be going without a dinner, so when the miserable day came, I should have to go without 50 dinners at once. Well, I shouldn't mind that much. I'd far rather go without them than eat them. Do you hear the snow against the window panes, Kitty? How nice and soft it sounds. Just as if someone was kissing the window all over outside. I wonder if the snow loves the trees in the fields, that it kisses them so gently, that it covers them up in snug, you know, with a white quilt, and perhaps it says, 'Go to sleep, darlings, until the summer comes again.' And when they wake up in the summer, Kitty, they dress themselves all in green and dance about, whenever the wind blows. Oh, that's so very pretty," cried Alice, dropping the ball of worsted to clap her hands. "And I do wish it were true. I'm sure the woods look sleepy in the autumn, when the leaves are getting brown. Kitty, can you play chess? Now, don't smile, my dear. I'm asking it seriously. Because when we were playing just now, you watched just as if you understood, and when I said check, you purred. Well, it was a nice check, Kitty, and really, I might have won if it hadn't been for that nasty knight that came wriggling down among my pieces. Kitty, dear, let's pretend." And here I wish I could tell you half of the things Alice used to say, beginning with her favorite phrase, "let's pretend." She had had quite a long argument with her sister only the day before, all because Alice had begun with, "let's pretend we're kings and queens," and her sister, who liked being very exact, had argued that they couldn't because there were only 2 of them, and Alice had been reduced at last to say, "Well, you can be one of them then, and I'll be all the rest." And once she had really frightened her old nurse by shouting suddenly in her ear, "Nurse, do let's pretend that I'm a hungry hyena and you're a bone." But this is taking us away from Alice's speech to the kitten. "Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. Do you know, I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you look exactly like her. Now, do try. There's a dear." And Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it up before the kitten as a model for it to imitate. However, the thing didn't succeed, principally, Alice said, because the kitten wouldn't fold its arm properly. So to punish it, she held it up to the looking glass, and I might see how sulky it was. If you're not built directly, she added, I'll put you through the looking glass house. How would you like that? Now, if you'll only attend, Kitty, and not talk so much, I'll tell you all about my ideas for the looking glass house. First, there's the room you can see through the glass. That's just the same as our drawing room, only the things go the other way. I can see all of it when I get up on the chair, all but the bit just behind the fireplace. Oh, I do so wish I could see that bit. I want so much to know whether they've a fire in the winter. You never can tell, you know, unless our fire smokes. And then the smoke comes up to that room, too. That may be only pretense, just to make it look as if there had a fire. Well then, the books are something like our books, only the words are the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books in the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. How would you like to live in Looking Glass House, Kitty? I wonder if they'd give you milk in there. Perhaps looking glass milk isn't good to drink. But oh, Kitty, now we've come to the passage. You can see a little peep of the passage in Looking Glass House. If you leave the door of our drawing room wide open, and it's very like our passage as far as you can see, only you know, it may be quite different on beyond. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could only get through into the Looking Glass House. I'm sure it's got, such beautiful things in it. Let's pretend there's a way of getting through it, somehow, Kitty. Let's pretend the glass has gone all soft like gauze, so that we can get through. Why, it's turning into a sort of mist now, I declare. It'll be easy enough to get through. She was on the chimney piece while she said this, though hardly she knew how she got there. And certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. Hold on 1 second, I gotta... I had to close the door. Creator's off today. Creator is off today, so he's catching up on his favorite shows, and he's a little bit deaf. He's been doing an experiment. Creator's been doing an experiment lately that has caused a lot of loud noises to happen in the sub-basements. So I think Creator might be a little deaf now. Anywho. And certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. In another moment, Alice was through the looking glass, and had jumped lightly down into the looking glass room. The first thing she did was to look whether there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was quite pleased to find that there was a real one, blazing away as brightly as the one she had left behind. So I shall be as warm in here as I was in the old room, thought Alice. Warmer, in fact, because there will be no one here to scold me away from the fire. Oh, what fun it will be when they see me through the glass in here, and can't get at me. She then began to look about, and noticed what could be seen from the old room was quite common and uninteresting, but that all the rest was as different as possible. For instance, the pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be all alive, and the very clock on the chimney piece, you know you can only see the back of it from the looking glass, has the face of a little old man grinning at her. They don't keep this room so tidy as the other, Alice thought to herself as she noticed several of the chessmen down in the hearth among the cinders. But in another moment, with a little, a surprise, she was down on her hands and knees watching them. Two chessmen were walking about, 2 and 2. Here are the Red King and the Red Queen, said Alice, in a whisper for fear of frightening them. And here are the White King and the White Queen, sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are 2 castles walking arm in arm. I don't think they can hear me, she went on as she put her head closer down. And I'm nearly sure they can't see me. I feel somehow as if I were invisible. Here something began speaking on the table behind Alice, and made her turn her head just in time to see one of the white pawns rolling over and began kicking. She watched it with great curiosity to see what would happen next. It is the voice of my child, said the White Queen. The White Queen cried out, as she rushed past the king so violently that she knocked him over among the cinders. My precious Lily, my imperial kitten, she began, scrambling wildly up the side of the fender. Imperial fiddlestick, said the king. rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He had a right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for he was covered with ashes from head to foot. Alice was very anxious to be of use, and as the poor little Lily was near screaming herself into a fit, she hastily picked up the queen and set her on the table by the side of her noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down, a rapid journey through the air had quite taken away her breath, and for a moment or two she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. As soon as she had recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting sulkily among the ashes. "Mind the volcano?" "What volcano?" said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire, as if he had thought that was the most likely place to find one. "Blew me up," panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. "Mind you come up the regular way. Don't get blown up." Alice watched the White King as he slowly struggled from bar to bar, till at last she said, "Why, you'll be hours and hours getting up to the table at that rate. I'd far better help you, hadn't I?" The king took no notice of the question. It was quite clear that he could neither hear nor see nor hear her. So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across more slowly than she had lifted the queen, that she mightn't take his breath away. But before she put him on the table, she thought she might as well dust him a little. He was so covered with ashes. She said afterwards that she had never seen in all her life such a face that the king had made, when he found himself held in the air by an invisible hand and being dusted. He was far too much astonished to cry out, but his eyes and his mouth went on getting larger and larger and rounder, till her hands shook with so it laughed that she nearly had him drop to the floor. "Oh, please don't make such a faces, my dear," she cried out, quite forgetting that the king couldn't hear her. You make me laugh so that I could hardly hold you. And don't keep your mouth open so wide. All the ashes will get into it. There now, I think you're tidy enough," she added as she smoothed his hair and set him upon the table near the queen. The king immediately fell flat on his back. "Sup, and guess what? My birthday's tomorrow." "Your birthday's tomorrow? I see, let's go! Happy birthday! Happy birthday! I hope you can come on stream tomorrow so that way I can sing happy birthday to you. I'm gonna sing happy birthday to you, I see. Watch. You're gonna get a special happy birthday song just for me. It's good to see you, I see. I hope you're enjoying the story." The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still. And Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done, and ran around the room to see if she could find any water to throw over him. However, she could find nothing but a bottle of ink, and when she got back with it, she found that he had recovered, and that he and the queen were talking together in a frightened whisper, so low that Alice could hardly hear what they were saying. The king was saying, "I assure you, my dear, I turned cold to the very ends of my whiskers." To which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." The horror of that moment, the king went on, I shall never forget. "You will, though," said the queen, "if you don't make a memorandum of it." Alice looked on with great interest as the king took an enormous memorandum book out of his pocket and began writing. A sudden thought struck her, and she took hold of the end of the pencil, which came some way over his shoulder, and began writing for him. The poor king looked puzzled and unhappy, and struggled with the pencil for some time without saying anything, but Alice was too strong for him, and at last panted out, "My dear, I must really get a thinner pencil. I can't manage this one a bit. It writes all manners of things I don't intend." "What manners of things?" said the queen, looking over the book, in which Alice had put the white knight sliding down the poker. "He balances very badly. That's not a memorandum of your feelings." There was a book lying near Alice on the table, and while she sat watching the White King, for she was still a little anxious about him, and had the ink all the ready to throw over him in case he fainted again, she turned over the leaves to find some parts that she could read. "For it's all in some language I don't know," she said to herself. It was like this. It's backwards writing. It's just backwards writing. "I'll try to be here because I got special things." Yay! Listen, if you can't be here, do all the special things, and I can just sing you happy birthday next time. But yes, if the words are backwards. That's what they're trying to show. I can read it backwards too. Jabberwocky. 'Twas Brigid, and 'twas Brilliant. Wow, I can't read it backwards. It's upside down. It's upside down and backwards. Okay, never mind. That's why I can't read it. She puzzled over this for some time. But at last a bright thought struck her. Why, it's a looking glass book, of course. If I hold it up to a glass, the words will go the right way again. And this is what the poem that Alice read. Jabberwocky, 'twas brillig and the slithy toes, did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mumraves outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwocky, my son, the jaw that bites, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird and shun, the frumrious bandersnatch. The frumrious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the maxim foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as an oafish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tugly wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2. And through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with his head, he went galloping back. Oh no! I may need some glue. I actually never opened these books until today. I kept them pretty safe. Seems that I have a signature of pages falling out, so I need some glue. Oh no! I'm gonna need some glue. Okay. Hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, callooh, he chortled with his joy. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toes, did gyre and gibble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mumraves outgrabe. It seems very pretty, she said when she had finished it, but it's rather hard to understand. You see, she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it all out. Somehow it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't know exactly what they are. However, somebody killed something. That's clear at any rate. But oh, thought Alice, suddenly jumping up, if I don't make haste, I shall have to go back to the looking glass before I've seen what the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first. She went out of the room in a moment and ran downstairs, or at least, it wasn't exactly running, but a new invention for getting downstairs quickly and easily, as Alice said to herself. She just kept the tips of her fingers on the handrail and floated gently down without even touching the stairs or her feet. But she floated on through the hall and would have gone straight out the door in the same way if she hadn't caught hold of the doorpost. She was getting a little giddy with so much floating in the air, and was rather glad to find herself walking again the natural way. Chapter 2, The Garden of Live Flowers. Gonna head out? Okay, I see. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, friend, and happy birthday. Happy birthday if I don't get to see you tomorrow. Happy birthday. Chapter 2, The Garden of Live Flowers. I should see the garden far better, said Alice to herself. If I could get to the top of the hill, and here's a path that leads straight to it. At least, no, it doesn't do that. After going a few yards along the path and turning several sharp corners. But I suppose it will at last. But how curious it twists. It's more like a corkscrew than a path. Well, this turn goes to the hill, I suppose. No, it doesn't. This goes straight back to the house. Well then, I'll try it the other way. And so she did, wandering up and down and trying turn after turn, but always coming back to the house, do as she would. Indeed, once, when she turned a corner rather more quickly than usual, she ran against it before she could stop herself. It's no use talking about it, Alice said, looking up at the house and pretending it was arguing with her. I'm not going in again yet. I know I should have to get through the looking glass again, back into the old room, and there'd be an end of all my adventures. So, resolutely turning her back upon the house, she set out once more down the path, determined to keep straight on until she got to the hill. For a few minutes, all went well, and she was just saying, I really shall do it this time, when the path gave a sudden twist and shook itself, as she described it afterwards, and the next moment she found herself actually walking in at the door. Oh, it's too bad, she cried. I never saw such a house for getting in the way. Never. However, there was a hill in full sight, so there was nothing to be done but start again. This time she came upon a large flower bed with a border of daisies and a willow tree growing in the middle. "Oh, Tiger Lily," Alice said, addressing herself to the one that was waving gracefully about in the wind. "I wish you could talk." "We can talk," said the Tiger Lily, "when there's anybody worth talking to." Alice was so astonished that she couldn't speak for a moment. It quite seemed to take her breath away. At length, as the Tiger Lily only went on, waving about, she spoke again in a timid voice, almost in a whisper. "And can all the flowers talk?" "As well as you can," said the Tiger Lily, and a great deal louder. "It isn't manners for us to begin, you know," said the Rose. "And I really was wondering when you'd speak. I said to myself, her face has got some sense in it, though it's not a clever one. Still, you're the right color, and that goes a long way." "I don't care about the color," the Tiger Lily remarked. "If only her petals curled up a little more, she'd be all right." Alice didn't like being criticized, so she began to ask, "Sir, can you get down from the table? Down. Down, Booby. Come on. Be a good boy. Down. Down." He looks so confused. He's like, "I don't know what to do with myself, Mom." "Down. Good boy. Oh, you're such a good boy. Good boy. Yeah. Your mama's good boy. Yes, you are. Mischievous little shit." Yes. Alright. You good? You good, buddy? You just gonna stick your head in that bag? Okay. Alice didn't like being criticized, so she began asking questions. "Aren't you sometimes frightened at being planted out here, with nobody to take care of you?" "There's a tree right in the middle," said the Rose. "What else is it good for?" "But what could it do if any danger came?" asked Alice. "It could bark," said the Rose. "It says bow wow," cried a daisy. "That's why its branches are called bows." "Bows." "Didn't you know that?" cried another daisy. And here they all began shouting together until the... "Hi, buddy. You're bored? Are you bored? Hi. Wanna say hi to the chat? Wanna say hi to the chat? Say hi, chat. Say hi, chat. There you go. That's my tea. You're standing on my book. I can't see anything. Come on, come sit in your hammock, boo-boo. Come on. He's rubbing up against my second monitor. Come on. You know better. Come. Come. Good boy. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do with himself. He's bored. He wants to play. I'm gonna play with him a little bit. After we finish the stream, I'm gonna get some of his toys and play with him a bit. Let's see. "Didn't you know that?" cried another daisy. And here they all began shouting together until the air seemed quite full of shrill little voices. "Silence, every one of you!" cried the Tiger Lily, waving itself passionately from side to side, and trembling with excitement. "They know I can't get at them," it panted, bending its quivering head towards Alice, "or they would never dare to do it." "Never mind," Alice said in a soothing tone, and stooped down to the daisies, who were just beginning again, and she whispered, "If you don't hold your tongues, I'll pick you." There was silence in a moment, and several of the pink daisies turned away. "That's right," said the Tiger Lily. "The daisies are the worst of all. When one speaks..." "Yes, buddy, what's up?" "You want to play, I know. Let Mommy finish what she's doing, and then I'll play with you, okay? Be a good boy, boo-boo." He gets to be very mischievous when he wants to play. Spoiled boy, I swear. "That's right," the Tiger Lily said. "Daisies are worst of all. When one speaks, they all begin together, and it's enough to make one wither to hear the way they go on." "How is it you can all talk so nicely?" Alice said, hoping to get into a better temper by a compliment. "I've been in many gardens before, but none of the flowers could talk." "Put your hand down and feel the ground," said the Tiger Lily. "Then you'll know why." Alice did so. It's very... Yes, buddy. Come, sit with me. Up. 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 You want to sit with your mama? Stop being bored. Behave yourself. Hold on, I'm gonna grab him. Grab my boy. Come here, fat boy. Oh my goodness gracious, you're so big and chunky. Oh, you're so big and chunky. Come here. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. Don't push away, you're gonna fall. What's this? Are you rolling around in gross crap again? What's this? Oh, what's this? I found out you're rolling in your litter box again, sir. You're gonna have a problem. Like, you have to take a bath. And I know you don't like taking baths. Alright, back to what we were doing. Alice did so. It's very hard, she said, but I don't see what that has to do with it. In most gardens, the tiger lily said, they make the beds too soft, so the flowers are always asleep. It sounded a very good reason, and Alice was quite pleased to know it. I never thought of it like that before. It is my opinion that you never think at all, the rose said in a rather severe tone. I never saw anybody that looked stupider, Violet said so suddenly that Alice quite jumped, for it hadn't spoken before. Hold your tongue, cried the tiger lily, as if you ever saw anybody. You keep your head under the leaves and snore away there till you know no more than what's going on in the world than if you were a bud. Are there any more people in the garden besides me? Alice said, not choosing to notice the rose's last remark. There's one other flower in the garden that can move about like you, said the rose. I wonder how you do it. You're always wondering, said the tiger lily. But she's more bushy than you are. Is she like me? Alice asked eagerly, for the thought crossed her mind. There's another little girl in the garden somewhere. Well, she has the same... Oh, watch out with your toe. Watch out with your toe. Let me see you. Someone needs a nail trimming. He's just chilling. He's just chilling in my arms right now. Well, she has the same awkward shape as you, the rose said, but she's redder, and her petals are shorter, I think. Her petals are done up close, almost like a dahlia, the tiger lily interrupted. Not tumbled about anyhow, like yours. But that's not your fault, the rose added kindly. You're beginning to fade, you know, and then one can't help one's petals getting a little untidy. Alice didn't like this idea at all, so to change the subject, she asked, does she ever come out here? I dare say you'll see her soon, said the rose. She's one of the thorny kind. Where does she wear the thorns? Alice asked with some curiosity. Why, all around her head, of course, the rose replied. I was wondering you hadn't got some too. I thought it was a regular rule. She's coming, cried the larkspur. I hear her footsteps, thump thump along the gravel walk. Alice looked around eagerly, and she found that it was the Red Queen. She's grown a good deal, was her first remark. She had indeed. When Alice first found her in the ashes, she had only been 3 inches high, and here she was, half a head taller than Alice herself. It's the fresh air that does it, said the rose. Wonderfully fine air it is out here. I think I'll go and meet her, said Alice, for, though the flowers were interesting enough, she felt that it would be far grander to have a talk with a real queen. You can't possibly do that, said the rose. I should advise you to walk the other way. It sounded nonsense to Alice, so she said nothing but set off at once towards the Red Queen. To her surprise, she lost sight of her for a moment, and found herself walking in at the front door again. A little provoked, she drew back, and after looking everywhere for the Queen, whom she spied out at last a long way off, she thought she would try the plan this time of walking in the opposite direction. Oh, come here, fat boy. Oh, you're slipping off my lap. Hi. Hi, chunky boy. Come on. You want to go? Alright, go ahead. Go ahead, Stinky. Go ahead, Stinky boy. Yes. It succeeded beautifully. Had she not been walking a minute before, she found herself face to face with the Red Queen, and full in sight of the hills that she had been so long at aiming at. "Where do you come from?" said the Red Queen. "And where are you going? Look up, speak nicely, and don't twiddle your fingers all the time." Alice attended to all these directions, and explained as well as she could that she had lost her way. I don't know what you mean by your way," said the Queen. "All the ways about here belong to me. Why do you come out here at all?" she added in a kinder tone. "Curtsy while you think of what to say. It saves time." Alice wondered a little at this. She was too much in awe of the Queen to disbelieve it. "I'll try it when I go home," she thought to herself. "The next time I'm a little late for dinner." "It's time for you to answer now," the Queen said, looking at her watch. "Open your mouth a little wider when you speak, and always say, 'Your Majesty.'" "I only wanted to see what the garden was like, Your Majesty." "That's right," said the Queen, patting her on the head, which Alice didn't like at all. "Though, when you say garden, I've seen gardens, compared with which this would be a wilderness." Alice didn't dare to argue the point, but went on. "And I thought I'd try to find my way to the top of that hill." "When you say hill," the Queen interrupted, "I could show you hills, in comparison with which you'd call that a valley." "No, I shouldn't," said Alice, surprised to contradict her at last. "A hill can't be a valley, you know. That would be nonsense." The Red Queen shook her head. "You may call it nonsense if you like," she said, "but I've heard nonsense, compared to which that would be as sensible as a dictionary." Alice curtsied again, as she was afraid from the Queen's tone that she was a little offended. And they walked on in silence until they got to the top of the little hill. For some minutes Alice stood without speaking, looking out in all directions, over the country, and a most curious country it was. There were a number of tiny little brooks running straight across it from side to side, and the ground between was divided up into squares by a number of little green hedges that reached from brook to brook. "I declare it marked out just like a large chessboard," Alice said at last. "There ought to be some men moving about somewhere." "And so there are," she added in a tone of delight, and her heart began to beat quick with excitement as she went on. "It's a great huge game of chess that's being played, all over the world. If this is the world at all, you know. Oh, what fun it is! How I wish I was one of them. I wouldn't mind being a pawn. If only I might join. Though, of course, I should like to be a queen at best." She glanced rather shyly at the real Queen as she said this, but her companion only smiled pleasantly and said, "That's easily managed. You can be the White Queen's pawn, if you like, as Lily's too young to play, and you're in the second square to begin with. When you get to the 8th square, you'll be a queen." Just at this moment, somehow or another, they began to run. Alice never could quite make it out, thinking it over afterwards. How it was that they began. All she remembers is that they were running hand in hand, and the Queen went so fast that it was all she could do to keep up with her. "And, sir, are you done jumping about?" "Booby?" "Hold on. I gotta go get Booby, because he's being a bad boy, as he is." "Why are you misbehaving, sir? You want to go out?" "Go ahead, come on." I let him out. Let's see if that helps. To be a mom of 2 active, crazy cats. Never a dull moment. Right. Alright. And the Queen went so fast that it was all she could do to keep up with her. And still the Queen kept crying, "Faster, faster." But Alice felt she could go no faster, though she had not breath left to say so. The most curious part of the thing was that the trees and all the other things around them never changed their places at all. However fast they went, they never seemed to pass anything. "I wonder if all the things move along with us," thought poor puzzled Alice. And the Queen seemed to guess her thoughts, for she cried, "Faster, don't try to talk." Not that Alice had any idea of doing that. She felt as if she would never be able to talk again. She was getting so much out of breath, and still the Queen cried, "Faster, faster," and dragged her along. "Are we nearly there?" Oh my god, excuse me. Excuse me, let me get some tea. cat hair. Like, no matter how much I brush my cats, they're still shedding. Especially Boopy. He's a lot of fur. He's a fluffy one. I brush him like twice a day. I don't think it's enough. Alright, where was I? Are we nearly there? Alice managed to pant out at last. Nearly there, the Queen replied. Why, we passed it 10 minutes ago. Faster. And they ran off for some time in silence, with the wind whistling in Alice's ears and almost blowing her hair off her head, she fancied. Now, cried the Queen. Faster, faster. And they went so fast that at last they seemed to skim through the air, hardly touching the ground with their feet, till suddenly, just as Alice was getting quite exhausted, they stopped, and she found herself sitting on the ground, breathless and giddy. The Queen propped her up against a tree and said kindly, You may rest a little now. Alice looked around her in great surprise. Why, I do believe we've been under this tree the whole time. Everything is just as it was. Of course it is, said the Queen. But would you have it? Well, in our country, said Alice, still panting a little, you generally get somewhere else, if you ran very fast for a long time, as we've been doing. A slow sort of country, said the Queen. Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. I'd rather not try, please, said Alice. I'm quite content to stay here. Only I am so hot and thirsty. Oh. I know what you'd like, the Queen said, good-naturedly, and took a little box out of her pocket. Have a biscuit? Alice thought it would not be civil to say no, though it wasn't at all what she wanted. So she took it and ate it as well as she could, and it was very dry, and she thought she had never been so nearly choked in all her life. While you're refreshing yourself, said the Queen, I'll just take the measurements. And she took a ribbon out of her pocket and marked in inches and began measuring the ground and sticking little pegs here and there. At the end of 2 yards, she said, putting in a peg to mark the distance, I shall give you your direction. Have another biscuit? No, thank you, said Alice. One is quite enough. Thirst quenched, I hope, said the Queen. Alice did not know what to say to this, but luckily the Queen did not wait for an answer, but went on. At the end of 3 yards, I shall repeat them, for fear of you forgetting them. At the end of 4 yards, I shall say goodbye, and at the end of 5, I shall go. She got all the pegs put in by this time, and Alice looked on with great interest, so as she returned to the tree, and they began to walk slowly down the road. At the 2-yard peg, she faced round and said, A pawn goes 2 squares in its first move, you know. So you'll go very quickly to the 3rd square. By railway, I should think. And you'll find yourself in the 4th square in no time. Well, that square belongs to Tweedledum and Tweedledee. The fifth is mostly water, and the 6th belongs to Humpty Dumpty. But you make no remark. I didn't know I had to make one just then, Alice faltered out. You should have said, the Queen went on in a tone of great reproof. It's extremely kind of you to tell me all this. However, we'll suppose it was said. The 7th square is all forest. However, one of the knights will show you the way, and in the 8th square we shall be queens together, and it's all feasting and fun. Alice got up and curtsied and sat down again. At the next peg, the Queen turned again, and this time said, "Speak in French when you can't think of the English. For a thing. Turn out your toes as you walk, and remember who you are." She did not wait for Alice to curtsy this time, but walked on quickly to the next peg, where she turned for a moment to say, "Goodbye," and then hurried on to the last. How it happened, Alice never knew, but exactly when she came to the last peg, she was gone. Whether she vanished into the air, or whether she ran quickly into the wood, and she can run very fast, thought Alice, there was no way of guessing. But she was gone, and Alice began to remember that she was a pawn, and that it would soon be time for her to make a move. Chapter 3. Looking Glass Insects. Of course, the first thing to do was to make a grand survey of the country she was going to travel through. It's something very like learning geography, thought Alice, as she stood on a tiptoe in hopes of being able to see a little further. Principal rivers. There are none. Principal mountains. I'm the only one, but I don't think I've got any name. Principal towns. Why, what are those creatures making honey down there? They can't be bees. Nobody ever saw a bees a mile off, you know. And for some time she stood silent, watching one of them that was bustling among the flowers, poking its proboscis into them, just as if it were the regular bee, thought Alice. However, this was anything but a regular bee. In fact, it was an elephant. As soon as Alice found out, though the idea quite took her breath away at first. And what enormous flowers they must be was her next idea. Something like cottages with roofs taken off and stalks put into them. And what quantities of honey they must make. I think I'll go down and... No, I won't just yet. She went on, checking herself as she was beginning to run down the hill and trying to find some excuse for turning shy so suddenly. It'll never do good to go down among them without a good long branch to push them away. And what fun it will be when they ask me how I like my walk. I shall say, oh, I liked it very well enough. Here came the favorite little toss of her head. Only it was so dusty and hot that the elephants did tease so. I think I'll go down the other way, she said after a pause. Or perhaps I may visit the elephants later. Besides, I do so want to get to the third square. So with this excuse, she ran down the hill and jumped over the first of the 6 little brooks. Tickets, please, said the guard, putting his head in at the window. In a moment, everybody was holding out a ticket. They were about the same size as the people, and quite seemed to fill the carriage. Now then, show your ticket, child, the guard went on, looking angrily at Alice. And a great many voices all said together, like the chorus of a song, thought Alice. Don't keep him waiting, child. Why, his time is worth £1,000 a minute. I'm afraid I haven't gotten one, said Alice in a frightened tone. There wasn't a ticket office where I came from. And again the chorus of voices went on. There wasn't room for one where she came from. The land there is worth £1,000 an inch. Don't make excuses, said the guard. You should have brought one from the engine driver. And once more the chorus of voices went on, with, the man that drives the engine, while the smoke alone is worth £1,000 a puff. Alice thought to herself, then there's no use in speaking. The voices didn't join in this time, as she hadn't spoken, but, to her great surprise, they all thought in chorus. I hope you understand what thinking in chorus means, for I must confess that I don't. Better say nothing at all. Language is worth £1,000 a word. I shall dream about £1,000 tonight, I know I shall, thought Alice. At this time the guard was looking at her, first through a telescope, then through a microscope, and then through an opera glass. At last he said, You're traveling the wrong way, and shut up the window and went away. So young a child, said the gentleman sitting opposite to her. He was dressed in white paper. Ought to know which way she's going, even if she doesn't know her own name. A goat, that was sitting next to the gentleman in white, shut his eyes and said in a loud voice, She ought to know her way to the ticket office, even if she doesn't know her alphabet. There was a beetle sitting next to the goat. It was a very queer carriage full of passengers all together. And, as the rule seemed to be that they should all speak in turn, he went on with, she'll have to go back from here as luggage. Alice, who couldn't see who was sitting beyond the beetle, but a hoarse voice spoke next to him. Change engines, it said, and there it choked and was obliged to leave off. Sounds like a horse, thought Alice to herself, and an extremely small voice, close to her ear, said, You might make a joke on that, something about horse, and horse, you know. Then a very gentle voice in the distance said, She must be labeled last with care, you know. And after that other voices went on. What a number of people there are in the carriage, thought Alice, saying, She must go by post, as she's got a head on her. She must be sent by a message by the telegraph. She must draw the train herself the rest of the way, and so on. But the gentleman dressed in white paper leaned forward and whispered in her ear, Never mind what they all say, my dear, but take a return ticket every time the train stops. Indeed I shan't, Alice said rather impatiently. I don't belong to this railway journey at all. I was in a wood just now, and I wish I could go back there. You might make a joke on that, said the little voice close to her ear. Something about you would if you could, you know. Don't tease so, said Alice, looking about in vain to see where the voice came from. And if you're so anxious to have a joke made, why don't you make one yourself? The little voice sighed deeply. It was very unhappy, evidently, and Alice could have said something pitying to comfort it. If it would only sigh like other people, she thought. This was such a wonderfully small sigh that she wouldn't have heard it at all if she hadn't come quite close to her ear. The consequence of this was that it tickled her ear very much and quite took off her thoughts from the unhappiness of the poor little creature. I know you are a friend, the little voice went on, a dear friend, and an old friend, and you won't hurt me, though I am an insect. What kind of insect? Alice inquired a little anxiously. What she really wanted to know was whether it could sting her or not, but she thought this wouldn't be quite a civil question to ask. What? You don't... The little voice began when it was drowned by a shrill scream from the engine, and everybody jumped up in alarm, Alice among the rest. The horse, who had put his head out of the window, quietly drew it in and said, "It's only a brook we have to jump over." Everybody seemed satisfied with this, though Alice felt a little nervous at the idea of trains jumping at all. "However, it'll take us to the fourth square. That's some comfort," she said. However, it'll take us to the fourth square. That's some comfort, she said to herself. And another... Booby does not know how to make up his mind today. I want to go out, I want to go in, I want to play, I want to cuddle. Needy little boy. Let me go let him in. Sir? In or out? Come. Go. Come here, chunky boy. Oh my goodness, you big chunky boy. You just want your mama's attention. That's all that you want. You just want your mama's attention. You just want mama's attention. I'm just holding him right now, giving him belly rubs. He looks so confused. He's like, "Mother, please. Mother, why? You know I love you, right? You know I love you, right? You like to mess about, especially when Mama's working." Yeah. Really? You got more to say? You got more to say, sir? You need a nail trimming? Ooh, look at these murder mittens. Look at these murder mittens. Yeah, I'm embarrassing you. I'm sorry. I just love you so much. Go ahead. I like teasing him. Although he really wants his attention. He's just a big attention hog. Both of them are. In another moment, she felt the carriage rise straight up into the air. In her fright, she caught at the thing nearest to her hand, which happens to be the goat's beard. But the beard seemed to melt away as she touched it, and she found herself sitting quietly under a tree, while the gnat, for that was the insect that she had been talking to, was balancing itself on a twig just over her head and fanning her with its wings. It certainly was a very large gnat, about the size of a chicken, thought Alice. Still, she couldn't feel nervous with it, after they had been talking together so long. "Then you don't like all insects?" the gnat went on, as quietly as if nothing had happened. "I like them when they can talk," said Alice. "None of them ever talk where I come from." What sort of insects do you rejoice in where you come from?" the gnat inquired. "I don't rejoice in insects at all," Alice explained, "because I'm rather afraid of them, at least the large kinds, but I could tell you the names of some of them." "Of course they answer to their names," the gnat remarked carelessly. "I never knew them to do it." "What's the use of their having names?" said the gnat. "They won't answer to them." "No use to them," said Alice, But it's useful to the people that name them, I suppose. If not, why do things have names at all? I can't say, the gnat replied. Further on in the wood down there, there's got no names. However, go on with your list of insects. You're wasting time. Well, there's the horsefly. Alice began counting off all the names on her fingers. All right, said the gnat. Halfway up that bush, you'll see a rocking horsefly. If you look, it's made entirely of wood, and it gets about by swinging itself from branch to branch. What does it live on? Alice asked with great curiosity. Sap and sawdust, said the gnat. Go on with the list. Alice looked at the rocking horsefly with great interest and made up her mind that it must have been just repainted. It looked so bright and sticky. And then she went on. There's the dragonfly. Look on the branch above your head, said the gnat, and there you'll find a snapdragonfly. Its body is made of plum pudding, its wings of holly leaves, and its head is a raisin burning and branding. And what does it live on? Asked Alice, as before. Frumenty and mince pie, the gnat replied, and it makes its nest in a Christmas box. And then there's the butterfly, Alice went on, after she had taken a good look at the insect with its head on fire. Had thought to herself, I wonder if that's the reason insects are so fond of flying into candles, because they want to turn into a snapdragonfly. Crawling on your feet, said the gnat. Alice drew back her feet in some alarm. You may observe a bread and butter fly. Its wings are thin slices of bread and butter. Its body is a crust, and its head is a lump of sugar. And what does it live on? Weak tea with cream in it. A new difficulty came into Alice's head. Supposing it couldn't find any, she suggested. Then it would die, of course. But that must happen very often, Alice remarked thoughtfully. It always happens, said the gnat. After this, Alice was silent for a minute or two, pondering. The gnat amused itself meanwhile by humming around and around her head. At last it settled again and remarked, I suppose you don't want to lose your name. No, indeed, said Alice, a little anxiously. And yet I don't know, the gnat went on in a careless tone. Only think how convenient it would be if you could manage to go home without it. For instance, if the governess wanted to call you for your lessons, she would call out, come here, and then she would have to leave off, because there wouldn't be any name for her to call, and of course you wouldn't have to go, you know. That I would never do, I'm sure, said Alice. The governess would never think of excusing me lessons for that. If she couldn't remember my name, she'd call me Miss, as the servants do. Well, she said Miss. It didn't say anything more, said the gnat remarked. Of course you'd miss your lessons. That's a joke. I wish you had made it. Why do you wish I had made it? I had made it, said Alice. It's a very bad one. But the gnat only sighed deeply, as 2 large tears came rolling down his cheeks. You shouldn't make jokes, said Alice, if it makes you so unhappy. Then came another one of those melancholy little sighs, and this time the poor gnat really seemed to have sighed itself away, for when Alice looked up, there was nothing whatever to be seen on the twig, and, as she was getting quite chilly with sitting still so long, she got up and walked on. She very soon came up to an open field, with wood on the other side of it. It looked much darker than the last wood, and Alice felt a little timid about going into it. However, on the second thoughts, she made up her mind to go on, for I certainly won't go back, she thought to herself, and this is the only way to the 8th square. This must be the wood, she said thoughtfully to herself, where things have no names. I wonder what will become of my name when I go in it. I shouldn't like to lose it at all, because they'd have to give me another, and it would be almost certain to be an ugly one. But then the fun would be trying to find a creature that has got my old name. It's just like the advertisements, you know, where people lose dogs. Answer the name of Dash has on a brass collar. Just fancy calling everything you meet Alice, until one of them answered. Only they wouldn't answer at all if they were wise. She was rambling on this way when she reached the wood. It was very cool and shady. Well, at any rate, it's a great comfort, she said as she stopped under the trees. After being so hot, to get into the what? She went on, rather surprised at not being able to think of the word. I mean to get under this, you know? Putting her hand on the trunk of the tree. What does it call itself, I wonder? I do believe it's got no name. Why, to be sure it hasn't. She stood silent for a moment thinking, then suddenly began again. Then it really has happened after all. And now, who am I? I will remember if I can. I'm determined to do it. But being determined didn't help her much, and all she could say after a great deal of puzzling was, L. I know it begins with L. Just then a fawn came wandering by. It looked at Alice with its large, gentle eyes, but didn't seem at all frightened. Here then, Alice said as she held out her hand and tried to stroke it, but only stirred back a little and then stood looking at her again. What do you call yourself? The fawn said at last. Such a soft, sweet voice it had. I wish I knew, thought poor Alice. She answered rather sadly. Nothing, just now. Think again, it said. That won't do. Alice thought, but nothing came of it. Please, will you tell me what you call yourself? She said timidly. I think it might help a little. I'll tell you if you come a little further on, the fawn said. I can't remember here. So they walked together through the wood, Alice with her arms clasped lovingly around the soft neck of the fawn, till they came out into another open field. And here the fawn gave a sudden bound into the air and shook itself free from Alice's arms. I'm a fawn, it cried out in a voice of delight, and dear me, you are a human child. A sudden look of alarm came into its beautiful brown eyes, and in another moment it had darted away at full speed. Alice stood looking at it, almost ready to cry with vexation at having lost her dear little fellow traveler so suddenly. However, I know my name now, she said, and that's some comfort. Alice, I won't forget it again. And now, which of these finger posts I ought to follow, I wonder? It was not a very difficult question to answer, as there was only one road through the wood, and the two finger posts both pointed along it. I'll settle it, Alice said to herself, when the road divides and they are pointing in different ways. But this did not seem likely to happen. She went on and on, a long way, but wherever the road divided there was sure to be two finger posts pointing in the same direction. One marked to Tweedledum's house, and the other to the house of Tweedledee. I do believe, Alice said at last, that they live in the same house. I wonder I never thought of that before. But I can't stay there long. I'll just call and say, how do you do, and ask them the way out of the wood. If I could only get to the 8th square before it gets dark. So she wandered on, talking to herself as she went, till, on turning a sharp corner, she came upon two little fat men, so suddenly that she could not help stare back. But in another moment she recovered herself, feeling sure that they must be. And that's where I'll leave it for now, because we're out of time! So, thank you all so much for being here. We're going to continue on with Chapter 4, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. And definitely going to finish this book off next week. So thank you all so much for being here. Thanks so much for enjoying the story. We will continue reading. We'll continue reading the story next week. And tomorrow, I'm going to be starting a new game called One Shot. So I hope I can see you guys there, and I hope you will enjoy the game just as much as I probably will. So thank you all so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Remember, hug your friends, tell someone you love them, and be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe, that big old subscribe button. It helps me out a lot, and you get to see all the weird and unhinged content that I make. And I love you guys all so very much, and I will see you tomorrow for One Shot. I'll be seeing you guys. Bye! Wait, hold on. There's my mouth. Okay. Bye! Bye!